Hello and welcome back to day 22 of How to Fix the World in 80 Days. And today we are talking about climate change. Now for all you people out there who think climate change is fake news, okay, but that's not really up for debate. The climate will always change, with or without us, and has been doing so for billions of years. The real question is, what is our impact, humans' impact, on the climate? Now that is something we can debate. So let me start by stating my opinion. I think that human activity negatively influences the climate and actually might be threatening our own survival. Clearly, a lot of people disagree with this, so let's break it down. Is it true that before humans came around, we went through ice ages and heat waves? Yes. But that doesn't mean that human activity does not negatively influence the climate. So now comes the difficult part. How do we prove that humans are accelerating these natural cyclical changes? Well, first of all, we need a cursory understanding of how climate change actually works. Second of all, how can I prove that human activity is directly related to these changes and that these changes will have a negative impact on our ability to actually survive in this environment? Okay. So clearly, I am no scientist. But in very basic terms, greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane are able to help regulate the climate by blocking out the rays of the sun. Too little gas and all the heat rises through the ozone layer, but too much gas and all the heat stays in. Now, the world has been very good at creating natural ways to balance this equation, like oceans are able to store a ton of CO2, and plants and trees are able to turn that CO2 into oxygen. All of these mechanisms existed long before humans came along. In fact, humans' total contribution to CO2 emissions and greenhouse gases are much smaller than 1% of total world output. So, what are we so worried about? Well, Newton's third law of physics states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So for every new product that we build, or for every new resource that we extract, we are going to be changing that natural balance of the earth. And I'm okay with that, but it does come with some consequences. So even though our total impact on world greenhouse gas emissions might be smaller than 1%, that's still a ton of pollution in the grand scheme of how the world works. For example, look at how much meat that we eat. To keep up with global demand for meat, we started factory farming chickens, cows, pigs, whatever. Yes, it tastes great, but it is completely unnatural. There is not supposed to be this many animals on the planet. Every year, these animals contribute 7.1 gigatons of CO2 emissions. Look at how many trees that we cut down. Since 1990, the world has cut down 129 million hectares of forest, which is about the size of South Africa. Look at how much garbage we produce. Every year, humans create 2.6 trillion pounds of garbage. 59% of that garbage ends up in landfills, meaning it's not being recycled, meaning we have to repeat this process every single year. The amount of energy it takes up to create all that stuff creates an uncalculable amount of greenhouse gases. Now, I could keep going on with different examples, but I think that you get the point. What's important to understand about all of this pollution is that it is having a measurable impact on the climate. CO2 levels are the highest they've been in 5 million years. Since 1885, our average world temperature has increased by 0.85 Celsius. Some of you are thinking, great, warmer weather, more beach days, better tans, wicked, but there are consequences to that. For every 1 Celsius rise in the temperature, grain production drops 5%. Sea levels might rise 20 centimeters. And for cities that are sitting close to sea level, like New York, Amsterdam, Shanghai, 20 centimeters might mean permanent flooding. And if you thought the Syrian refugee crisis was bad, wait until Bangladesh starts to sink, which, by the way, is already happening. Despite all this doom and gloom, I'm not ready to give up hope yet. What choice do we have? And the one good thing about years and years of denying and neglecting our impact on climate change is that it has left us with a ton of room for improvement. So here are just a few examples of how we can reduce our global carbon footprint. 1, make a personal commitment. Before yelling at others, make sure that you take shorter showers, that you recycle, that you take public transport, really anything you can do to lower your personal carbon footprint. We can only hope that others will follow your lead. 2, invest in green energy. Over the past 5-6 years, green energy jobs in Canada have increased by 37%, and they now actually outproduce petro jobs. You can have a green energy policy and a thriving economy. 3, international cooperation. The environment affects us all, and it does not care how big you build your border wall. Yes, I'm looking at you. You are the only ones who did not sign on to the Paris Agreement. Shame on you. 4, when you do sign on to these international agreements, make sure that you actually follow through with your commitments. Talk is cheap. Don't be like Canada, who backed out of the Kyoto Protocol when they realized that they weren't going to hit their commitments. 5, keep your streets clean. Walking around with your head down is disgusting. We throw all kinds of garbage on the floor. Why don't we be like Singapore, who gives fines to people who throw their garbage on the ground? It's not the craziest idea. 6, recycle our garbage. Why can't we be more like Sweden? They are so good at turning their recycling into energy that only 1% of their garbage actually ends up in landfills. That's awesome. You see, climate change doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. All around the world, we are making positive changes in green energy, in replanting our trees, in getting our garbage out of the ocean. These are all positive changes that don't just impact the climate, they impact our quality of life. So I'd like to know what you do in your personal life to reduce your footprint. I'd like to know what you have heard about what's going on around the world to help impact these positive changes. Together, we can actually make a massive positive difference on the climate. I do not want to be remembered as the generation that completely blew it. Do you?